Have you ever received a phone call that promised to change your life? A voice so smooth, so convincing, that for just a moment, you believed your financial struggles were finally over. I'm Margaret Chen, and I'm 47 years old. I run a small crafts business here in Portland, Oregon, selling handmade pottery and textiles at local markets and through my online store. For 15 years, I poured my heart into this business. Every bowl I shaped on my pottery wheel, every fabric pattern I designed, they all carried pieces of my soul. But last year, I almost lost everything, not to a natural disaster, not to a failed product line, but to something far more insidious, the sweet, poisonous words of a scammer who knew exactly what I wanted to hear. And the worst part? I let him in. I opened the door myself. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. Tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it's traveled, because what happened to me could happen to anyone, and I mean anyone, who's ever felt the pressure of keeping a small business alive in uncertain times. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because Tuesdays were always my inventory days. I'd wake up at 5, make a strong pot of coffee, and spend hours in my small workshop behind our house, counting stock, checking orders, planning the week ahead. My husband David would already be at his job at the warehouse, and my 2 teenage kids, Emma and Lucas, would still be asleep. The house was quiet, just me, the hum of the kiln, and the smell of wet clay. My phone rang around 7. I almost didn't answer because I was elbow deep in glaze, but something made me wipe my hands and pick it up. "Mrs. Chen?" The voice was warm, professional, with just a hint of friendliness. "My name is James Whitfield, and I'm an investment advisor with Horizon Growth Partners. Do you have a few minutes to talk about your business?" I should have hung up right there, but I didn't, because the truth was my business was struggling. Sales have dropped 30% over the past year. Competition from mass-produced imports was crushing my margins. I was barely breaking even most months, and the savings David and I had built over 20 years were slowly draining away to cover shortfalls. I was tired. So tired. "How did you get my number?" I asked, my guard half raised. James laughed gently. "Mrs. Chen, your business has an excellent reputation in the Portland area. We specialize in helping small business owners like you access growth capital and investment opportunities that can take you to the next level. I've reviewed your online presence, and I believe you're sitting on tremendous untapped potential." Untapped potential. Those 2 words hit me like sunlight through clouds. "What kind of opportunities?" I asked, my voice is softer now. "Well, that's exactly what I'd love to discuss with you. Are you free for coffee sometime this week? I promise no obligations. Just a conversation between 2 people who care about helping small businesses thrive." I hesitated. Something in my gut whispered warnings, but another part of me, the part that lay awake at 3 in the morning calculating bills, the part that felt guilty every time my kids asked for something I couldn't afford, the part that desperately wanted to believe there was a way forward, that part said yes. "Thursday afternoon works for me," I said. "Perfect. I'll text you the address. Looking forward to meeting you, Margaret." He used my first name like we were already friends. That should have been my first clue. The coffee shop James chose was upscale, the kind of place where a latte cost $7 and everyone seemed to be working on laptops with expensive headphones. I felt out of place in my work jeans and clay-stained jacket, but James greeted me with such genuine warmth that my discomfort melted away. He was in his early 40s, I'd guess, well-dressed in a charcoal suit, clean-shaven, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He looked successful, trustworthy, like someone who'd figured out the secret formula I was still searching for. "Margaret, thank you so much for meeting me," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Can I get you something? Please, do anything you'd like." We sat by the window, sunlight streaming across the table, and James opened a leather portfolio. Let me start by saying this. What you've built is remarkable, he began, sliding a printed report across to me. I pulled some public data on your business. Your customer reviews are outstanding. Your brand loyalty is strong. You're doing everything right operationally. I stared at the report. It had my business name, my website screenshots, even a chart showing my social media engagement. It looked professional, official. The problem, James continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is that you're trapped in what we call the small business ceiling. You're working harder than ever, but your revenue has plateaued because you lack access to strategic capital and high-return investment vehicles. He pointed to another chart showing projections, lines climbing steeply upward, numbers that made my heart race. What if I told you there's a way to generate passive income streams that could double, even triple, your current revenue without increasing your workload? What if I told you that thousands of small business owners just like you are already doing it? I leaned forward. How? James smiled. Offshore growth investments, specifically short-term bond portfolios in emerging markets with guaranteed returns. The beauty of this approach is that your principal is protected, the returns are contractual, and you maintain complete liquidity. You can pull your money out anytime, no questions asked. It sounded too good to be true, but James had answers for everything. He showed me testimonials from other business owners, people with names and photos and glowing reviews. He explained how the investment was structured, using terms like secured instruments and regulatory compliance that sounded impressive even though I didn't fully understand them. Here's what I propose, he said, pulling out a contract. Start small. Invest in just $5,000 for 90 days. At the end of that period, you'll receive your principal back plus a guaranteed 12% return. That's $600. Pure profit. No risk. I looked at the contract. It had official-looking logos, legal language, and signature lines. If you're happy with the results, James continued, you can reinvest larger amounts. Some of my clients are earning $5,000, $10,000, even $20,000 a month in passive income. Imagine what that would do for your business, for your family. I imagined it. I imagined paying off our credit card debt. I imagined upgrading my equipment. I imagined not feeling that constant knot of anxiety in my stomach every time I checked our bank balance. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, James replied smoothly. Take all the time you need. But I'll be honest with you, Margaret. These opportunities don't stay available for long. The fund I'm placing clients with right now has limited spots, and they're filling up fast. I'd hate for you to miss out because you waited too long. Urgency, scarcity, classic manipulation tactics. But I didn't see it then. That night, I told David about the meeting. We sat at our small kitchen table after the kids had gone to bed, and I showed him the materials James had given me. David frowned as he read through the contract. Margaret, this feels off. 12% in 90 days? That's a 48% annual return. That's not realistic. But it's secured, I argued. James explained how it works. These are legitimate investment vehicles used by institutional investors. Did you verify any of this? Did you look up this company online? I didn't. I'd been so swept up in James's presentation, so desperate for a solution that I'd skipped the most basic due diligence. I'll research it tonight, I said defensively. David sighed. He knew better than to push too hard when I was in this mood. Just be careful, okay? If something sounds too good to be true. I know, I snapped. I'm not an idiot, David. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. I stayed up late that night searching for information about Horizon Growth Partners and James Whitfield. I found a professional-looking website with testimonials, a physical address in Seattle, and even a customer service number. Everything seemed legitimate. What I didn't find, what I should have been looking for, were the red flags. The fact that the company wasn't registered with the SEC. The fact that the address in Seattle was just a mail forwarding service. The fact that every single testimonial used stock photos I could have found with a reverse image search. I saw what I wanted to see, and I ignored everything else. 2 days later, I transferred $5,000 to the account James provided. It hurt to move that money. It was a significant chunk of our emergency fund, savings we'd spent years building. But James had assured me it was temporary, that I'd have it back, with interest in just 3 months. "You're making the smartest decision of your business career," James told me when I called to confirm the transfer. "Trust me, Margaret, 3 months from now, you're going to wonder why you didn't do this sooner." For the first week, nothing happened. Then, on day 8, I received an email notification. My account balance had increased by $200. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. It was real. The returns were actually showing up. I called James immediately. "I just saw the deposit." "Congratulations," he said warmly. "That's your first disbursement. The fund managers distributed early returns to several accounts, and yours was selected. See, I told you this was legitimate." $200. It wasn't life-changing, but it was real money, tangible proof that this wasn't a scam. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 2 more small deposits, $150, then another $125. My initial investment was already earning back significant returns. I was elated, I was vindicated, and I was hooked. When James called me in week 4, I was ready to listen. "Margaret, I have exciting news," he said. "The fund is expanding into a new sector, tech startups in Southeast Asia, and they're offering current investors an exclusive opportunity to increase their positions before the general offering opens. The minimum investment for this tier is $25,000, but the projected returns are substantially higher. We're talking about 20 to 25% quarterly. $25,000. That was nearly half of our remaining savings." "James, I don't know." "I understand your hesitation," he said smoothly, "but look at the returns you've already earned. Look at how quickly the money is flowing. Margaret, you're standing at a crossroads right now. You can play it safe and watch other people build wealth, or you can take calculated risks and change your family's financial future forever." "I need to talk to my husband." "Of course. But Margaret..." His voice dropped. "Between you and me, this opportunity closes on Friday. After that, the fund moves to institutional investors only, and retail clients like us get locked out. I'm only calling my top performers, people I know have the courage to seize opportunities when they appear." Courage. He made it sound noble, not reckless. That night, David and I had our worst fight in years. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "Margaret, we are not risking $25,000 on something we don't fully understand." "But it's working. Look at the deposits I've already received." "Those could be fake. They could be using your own money to create the illusion of returns." "You're just afraid," I said bitterly. "You've always been afraid of taking risks. That's why we're stuck in the same place we were 10 years ago." The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. But it was too late. The damage was done. David stood up slowly, his face pale. "If you do this," he said quietly, "you do it alone. I won't support it, and I won't be responsible for what happens." He left the room, and I sat there in silence, trembling with anger and fear and something else I couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Desperation, certainly. The next morning, without telling David, I transferred $25,000 to James's investment account. For 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. I received another deposit, $800 this time, and James sent me weekly updates about how my portfolio was performing. Then the calls started. "Margaret, we need to talk about your account." James's voice had lost its warmth. Now it sounded urgent, almost frantic. "There's been a regulatory freeze on international transfers due to new compliance requirements. Your funds are safe, but we need to pay a processing fee to release them." My stomach dropped. "What kind of fee?" $5,000. It's standard for transfers over a certain threshold. Once it's paid, everything gets released. Your principal plus all accumulated returns. James, I don't have another $5,000. Margaret, listen to me. If you don't pay this fee, your entire investment gets forfeited by regulatory holding. You'll lose everything. But if you can scrape together the fee, borrow it, put it on a credit card, anything, you'll get back over $32,000. Think about the math. I thought about the math. I also thought about David's warnings, about the sinking feeling in my gut, about how quickly everything had changed. I need time to think. You have 48 hours, James said sharply. After that, the freeze becomes permanent. I hung up, my hands shaking. For the first time since this started, real fear crept in. Not the anxious fear of missing out, but the cold, nauseating fear that I'd been playing. I finally did what I should have done months ago. I called the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC agent I spoke to was kind but direct. Mrs. Chen, what you've described is a classic advance fee fraud scheme. The initial small returns you received were likely funded by your own money or by deposits from other victims. The regulatory freeze is a standard tactic to extract more money from you. There is no legitimate investment. There never was. I felt the room spinning. But the website, the testimonials, the company address, all fake. These scammers are sophisticated. They create elaborate facades specifically to target people like you. Educated, hardworking business owners who are financially stressed and looking for solutions. What do I do? You need to report this to local law enforcement and file a complaint with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. But Mrs. Chen, I need to be honest with you. The chances of recovering your money are extremely slim. These operations usually run from overseas, and by the time we trace them, the money is long gone. $30,000 gone. I sat in my workshop that night, surrounded by the pottery I'd spent years perfecting, and I cried harder than I'd cried since my father died. I was so stupid, so naive, so desperate to believe there was an easy way forward that I'd ignored every warning sign, every red flag, every instinct that told me to stop. And now my family would pay the price for my foolishness. Telling David was the hardest thing I've ever done. I waited until the kids were asleep. Then I sat him down at the kitchen table and told him everything. How much I'd invested, how the scam worked, how I'd lost it all. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just looked tired, defeated. How are we going to recover from this? He asked quietly. I don't know. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of my mistake crushing both of us. But then, something unexpected happened. David reached across the table and took my hand. We'll figure it out, he said. We always do. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was graceful. And at that moment, it was more than I deserved. The next few months were brutal. We had to take out a small business loan just to keep my crafts business operational. We cut every possible expenses-canceled streaming service, stopped eating out, postponed all non-essential purchases. I took on freelance graphic design work in the evenings, and David picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. Emma and Lucas knew something was wrong, but we didn't tell them the details. We just said money was tight, that we needed to be careful about a while. What hurt most wasn't the financial loss, though that was devastating enough. It was a shame, the humiliation of knowing I'd been conned, the guilt of putting my family in this position. I started having panic attacks at night, lying awake calculating numbers that never added up, replaying every conversation with James, searching for the moment I should have known better. My therapist later told me this was normal. Scam victims often experience symptoms similar to PTSD, she explained. You've suffered a violation of trust that goes beyond just financial loss. You're grieving the person you thought you were, someone too smart to be fooled. She was right. I was grieving. But slowly, painfully, I was also learning. 6 months after the scam, I did something I'd been avoiding. I started researching how investment fraud actually works. I learned about affinity fraud, where scammers target specific groups, religious communities, ethnic groups, professional associations, because people naturally trust those they perceive as similar. I learned about the psychology of urgency and scarcity, how to create artificial deadlines and limited opportunities, short circuits rational decision-making. I learned about the power of small wins, how scammers let you earn initial returns to build trust before asking for larger investments. I found documented every tactic James used in fraud prevention guides. He hadn't been creative or original. He'd just been skilled at applying proven manipulation techniques to vulnerable targets, people like me. I also learned about the shame that keeps victims silent. An estimated 70% of fraud victims never report their losses because they're too embarrassed. They blame themselves, just like I'd been blaming myself. But the more I learned, the more I realized something crucial. This wasn't about intelligence. This wasn't about being naive or stupid. Scammers succeed because they exploit fundamental human needs, the need for security, for hope, for a better future. They prey on the gap between where we are and where we want to be, and in that gap, they plant their poison. I started attending a support group for fraud victims at our community center. The first time I walked through those doors, I almost turned around and left. The shame felt suffocating. But I forced myself to sit down in that circle of plastic chairs, and I listened. There was Marcus, a 62-year-old retired teacher who'd lost $80,000 to a romance scam. There was Priya, a 35-year-old nurse who'd invested in a fake cryptocurrency scheme. There was Robert, a 54-year-old accountant, an actual accountant, who'd been scammed out of his retirement fund by someone claiming to be with the IRS. Each story was different, but the patterns were identical: urgency, false credibility, emotional manipulation, and exploitation of legitimate needs and desires. When it was my turn to share, my voice shook. I'm Margaret, and I lost $30,000 to an investment scam. I still can't believe I fell for it. An older woman across the circle, Helen, spoke up. Margaret, how long have you been running your business? 15 years. And in those 15 years, have you made many serious business mistakes? I thought about it. No, I've been careful. Conservative, even. Exactly. You were targeted because you were careful. Scammers don't want stupid victims. Stupid victims don't have money. They want smart people who are under stress, who are looking for solutions, who have something to protect. They want people exactly like you. Those words changed something in me. I wasn't weak. I wasn't foolish. I was human. And being human means being vulnerable to manipulation, especially when we're desperate and afraid. As the months passed and the initial crisis subsided, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was going to use it. I started giving talks at local small business associations about fraud prevention. I created a workshop called The 5 Red Flags of Investment Scams. I shared my story publicly, despite the embarrassment, because I realized that silence only helped the scammers. At my first presentation, 30 people showed up. I stood at the front of that conference room, my hands shaking, and I told them everything. How charming James had been, how legitimate everything looked, how easy it was to rationalize away my doubts. I'm not here to tell you I'm special, I said. I'm here to tell you I'm ordinary, and that's exactly why this happened to me, and why it could happen to you. I taught them what I'd learned. Red flag number 1, guaranteed high returns with low or no risk. Real investments always carry risk. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. Red flag number 2, pressure to invest quickly. Legitimate opportunities don't disappear overnight. Urgency is a manipulation tactic. Red flag number 3, complex strategies that are difficult to understand. If you can't explain investment to a child, you don't understand it well enough to invest in it. Red flag number 4, difficulty accessing your money. Any investment that makes withdrawal difficult or impossible is a trap. Red flag number 5. The seller has more information about you than you have about them. Scammers research their targets carefully while hiding their own backgrounds. James had hit every single one of these flags. I'd just been too desperate to notice. After that first presentation, a woman in her 50s approached me, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I almost invested in something last week that had all those red flags, but I was going to do it anyway because I need the money so badly. You just saved me." In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. My loss could prevent someone else's. Around this time, I also reconnected with my insurance agent, Linda Martinez. I'd been avoiding her calls because I was ashamed of what had happened and worried about how it might affect our policies. But when I finally met with her, she was incredibly understanding. "Margaret, you're not the first client this has happened to," she said gently. "In fact, I've seen an increase in fraud cases over the past few years. That's why I want to talk to you about something most people don't think about: fraud protection insurance." I'd never heard of it. Linda explained. "It's a type of coverage that can help protect you from certain financial crimes. It's not common in personal insurance yet, but some business policies include it. More importantly, I want to make sure all your other protections are solid: your life insurance, your business interruption coverage, your disability insurance." She pulled out my policy documents and walked me through each one. "Your life insurance has a waiver of premium clause," she explained. "That means if you become disabled and can't work, your insurance premiums are waived, but your coverage continues. Do you remember when we added that?" I didn't. I'd signed those papers years ago without really understanding them. "And your business interruption insurance," she continued, "covers loss of income if you have to temporarily close due to specific causes: fire, natural disaster, even certain equipment failures. But it doesn't cover financial losses from fraud. That's why we need to look at adding separate coverage." As Linda went through each policy, the liability insurance that protected me if a customer was injured, the property insurance that covered my equipment and inventory, the health insurance that kept my family protected, I realized something profound. These boring, expensive insurance policies I'd been paying for all these years were actually my safety net. While I'd been chasing get-rich-quick schemes, the real protection had been there all along, quietly doing its job. "Linda," I asked, "why didn't I appreciate all this before?" She smiled sadly. "Because insurance doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't promise to make you rich. It just promises to catch you when you fall. And most people don't appreciate it until they need it." I thought about James and his promise of 48% returns. I thought about all the money I'd thrown away chasing an illusion. And I thought about these policies, unglamorous, steady, reliable, that had actually been protecting me and my family this entire time. "I want to review everything," I told Linda. "I want to understand every clause, every exclusion, every benefit, and I want to make sure we're properly covered." For the next 2 hours, we went through my policies, line by line. Linda explained concepts I'd never heard of. Grace period, the time after a missed payment where your policy remains active. Rider options, additional coverage you can add to a base policy. Inflation protection, automatic increases in coverage to match rising costs. Exclusions, specific situations where coverage doesn't apply. It was like learning a new language, but this time I paid attention. This time I asked questions. This time I understood that real financial security doesn't come from chasing extraordinary returns. It comes from understanding and maintaining the ordinary protections we too often take for granted. A year after the scam, something unexpected happened. I got a call from the FBI. "Mrs. Chen, this is Special Agent Williams. We've arrested 3 individuals in connection with a fraud operation that matches the description of what happened to you. We'd like you to testify before a grand jury." My heart pounded. "You caught them?" "We believe so. The investigation is ongoing, but your testimony could help us build a strong case. I testified 3 weeks later. Sitting in that courtroom looking at the 3 men in suits who destroyed dozens of lives, I felt a strange sense of closure. One of them was James, or at least, that's the name he'd given me. His real name was Marcus Thompson, and he had 12 prior fraud convictions under different aliases. Looking at him, I felt nothing. Not anger, not hate. Just a kind of sad recognition that some people make their living by destroying others' dreams. The prosecution asked me to describe what happened, and I told my story clearly, without embellishment. I explained how the scam worked, how convincing it was, how real the initial returns felt. "Mrs. Chen," the prosecutor asked, "looking back, do you think there's anything you could have done differently to protect yourself?" I thought carefully before answering. "Yes," I said. "I could have slowed down. I could have done basic verification, not just looking at their website, but checking official databases, calling the SEC, talking to a financial advisor I trusted. I could have listened to my husband's warnings. I could have remembered that anything that sounds too good to be true probably is." "But," I continued, "I also want to say this. These men are professionals. They've perfected their techniques over years, maybe decades. They study psychology. They practice their scripts. They create elaborate facades. Yes, I made mistakes, but they exploited those mistakes with criminal precision. The blame doesn't belong to the victims. It belongs to the predators." The jury convicted all 3 men. They received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. I never got my money back. The funds had been moved through so many accounts in so many countries that they were impossible to trace. But at least I had something. Justice, however incomplete. Today, 2 years after the scam, my life looks very different. My business is still small, still struggling at times. But I've learned to be content with sustainable growth rather than dramatic expansion. I've learned that success isn't about getting rich quickly. It's about building something solid, something real, something that can weather storms. David and I are closer now than we've been in years. The crisis forced us to communicate in ways we'd stopped doing. We have weekly financial meetings where we go over everything together. Budget, savings, investments, insurance. No more secrets, no more unilateral decisions. Emma is in college now, and Lucas is a junior in high school. We told them the full story of what happened, not to burden them, but to teach them. They need to know that even smart, capable adults can be manipulated. They need to understand the red flags. I still do my fraud prevention workshops, but I've expanded them. Now I will also talk about the importance of proper insurance coverage, about understanding the fine print, about asking questions until you truly comprehend what you're signing. I tell people about the inflation protection rider on my life insurance that Linda convinced me to add. I tell them about the critical illness coverage that would pay out if I were diagnosed with cancer or had a heart attack, giving my family financial breathing room during a medical crisis. I explain the difference between term life insurance and whole life insurance, between actual cash value property coverage and replacement cost coverage. I make insurance interesting by making it really showing how these boring policies can be the difference between financial disaster and financial survival. Most importantly, I will talk about the psychology of desperation. When you're drowning, I tell my audience, anyone who offers you a life preserver looks like a savior. But sometimes that life preserver is actually an anchor in disguise. The key is learning to recognize the difference before you grab it. Last month, I received an email from a woman named Sarah who'd attended one of my workshops. "Margaret," she wrote, "I need to thank you. After hearing your story, I started questioning an investment opportunity my cousin had been pushing on me. I did the research you recommended, and it turned out to be a pyramid scheme. You saved me from losing $50,000. I read that email 3 times, tears streaming down my face. $50,000, one person. Because I'd been willing to share my shame. That's when I realized My loss wasn't meaningless. It had been expensive education, and now I could use that education to protect others. I thought about all the insurance policies I'd ignored for years, treating them as necessary evils rather than valuable tools. I thought about how I'd chase the promise of quick wealth while overlooking the steady, reliable protection I already had. I thought about James and his smooth talk, his promises, his manipulation. And I thought about the bitter lesson I'd learned. Real financial security doesn't come from finding shortcuts or secret formulas. It comes from understanding the basics, from asking questions, from being patient, from building slowly and sustainably. It comes from protecting what you have before you chase what you want. Today, when people ask me for business advice, I tell them this: don't ask me how to get rich quickly. I tried that and it nearly destroyed my family. Instead, ask me how to build something that lasts. Ask me how to protect yourself from the downside while you work toward the upside. Ask me how to recognize manipulation when it's dressed up in a nice suit and a friendly smile. I will tell them about the importance of having 6 months of savings in an easily accessible emergency fund. I tell them about the value of term life insurance that matches your income replacement needs. I will tell them about disability insurance that protects your earning power if you can't work. I tell them to read their insurance policies carefully, to understand the exclusions and limitations, to ask their agent to explain anything they don't understand in plain language. I tell them that the insurance industry isn't glamorous, but it's essential, that the premiums you pay aren't wasted money, they're the cost of peace of mind, the price of protection. And I will tell them my story, all of it. The hope, the desperation, the sweet talk, the bitter lesson. Because if my mistakes can save even one person from the same fate, then maybe, just maybe, those $30,000 weren't completely wasted. A few weeks ago, I was working in my pottery studio, shaping a large serving bowl on my wheel, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. For a moment, my heart raced, an echo of old trauma. But then I remembered. I know the red flags now. I know the questions to ask. I know when to hang up. I answered. "Hello, is this Margaret Chen?" The voice was professional, friendly. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is David Richardson, and I'm calling from Premier Investment Group. We've been reviewing successful small business owners in your area, and I believe we have some exciting opportunities that could help you grow your business exponentially." I hung up. I didn't feel rude. I felt empowered, because I no longer need validation from strangers who promise easy solutions. I no longer chase the illusion of effortless success. I no longer believe that wealth comes from anything other than hard work, smart planning, and yes, proper protection through insurance and risk management. I turned back to my pottery wheel, my hands covered in clay, and I smiled. This was real. This was mine. This was enough. So let me ask you something, wherever you are right now watching this video. Have you ever been tempted by a promise that seemed too good to be true? Have you ever felt so desperate for a solution that you ignored your better judgment? Have you taken the time to understand your insurance policies, what they don't, what riders you should consider adding? Do you know the warning signs of financial fraud? Could you recognize manipulation when it's wrapped in professional-looking documents and delivered by someone charming? I'm asking because I know I'm not the only one. I know there are thousands, maybe millions, of people right now standing where I stood 2 years ago, on the edge of a decision that could change everything. And I want to say this to you directly. Slow down. Whatever opportunity is being presented to you, whatever pressure you're feeling to act immediately, whatever fear of missing out is clouding your judgments down, do your research, not on the website the seller provides, but on independent verification sources. Check the SEC database. Call your state's Department of Financial Regulation. Talk to a fee-only financial advisor who has no stake in whether you invest or not. Ask questions. Keep asking until you genuinely understand what you're being offered. If someone gets defensive or evasive when you ask for clarification, that's a red flag. Review your existing protections, understand your insurance coverage. Make sure you have adequate life insurance, disability insurance, liability coverage, and business interruption insurance if you're a business owner. Talk to people you trust, not people who will tell you what you want to hear, but people who will challenge your assumptions. Your spouse, your accountant, your insurance agent, your best friend who asks hard questions. And remember this, there is no shortcut to sustainable success. None. Anyone who tells you differently is either deluded or dishonest. Real wealth, the kind that lasts, the kind that provides genuine security, is built slowly. It's built from understanding the basics: budgeting, saving, investing wisely in diversified portfolios, protecting your downside through appropriate insurance, and never, ever risking more than you can afford to lose. It's not exciting. It won't make you rich overnight, but it works.